Welcome everyone to FamilieTid. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce myself in Norwegian. So, hallo alle sammen. Jeg heter Eddy. My name is Eddy. And today I'm going to be kind of shepherding you through this journey through song, through Nordic song that dates back centuries. So that's where we'll start today. We'll start centuries ago. We'll learn a song, then we'll come up to more modern history, and then eventually we'll get to the music of today. But really, we're going to spend most of today learning a song called Sharing on the Stop. If you can't say that right now, that's okay. We haven't even learned it yet. We'll talk about that in a moment. So without further ado, I think, Greg, if you would start sharing the slides, that would be amazing. So like I said, this is FamilieTid through the years, and we're starting off with the olden days, okay? So this is folkemusik. Can you try to say that with me at home? Folkemusik. Folkemusik. And that means folk music, or like the music of the people. And really, this folk music that we associate with countries all over the world, they're individual to those countries and even provinces and regions in those countries. It holds a cherished place in many of our hearts, especially in the Nordic region, right? Most of my familiarity is in Norway, but today we'll talk a little bit about Sweden, about Denmark, maybe about Finland a little bit, maybe Iceland here and there. But most of my expertise lies in Norway. So just so you know. So this folk music really evolved organically, and it's often in rural areas first. So Norway, if you aren't familiar with the topography, it's very rocky, it's very long, and there's lots of water. Not really easy to traverse, shall we say. So these communities were actually pretty isolated. And in these communities, we get wonderful, wonderful tunes that still exist to this day. And I want to mention that these centuries old tunes and traditions, they're really driven by community and shared experiences, shared traditions of people working and people celebrating together in their small, isolated villages. And how wonderful that we still have some of these tunes today. Um, so, with this shared community-based experience, it's going to be critical that we engage in community here in a couple minutes and learn these songs or one of these songs together. And when I say that it's important to know that it's community based, it's because a lot of our music has really developed since then, not only in the way it sounds, but in the way we experience, right? Um, so one of those things is in the 1800s, a lot of the music that we associate with classical music, that was really composer driven. The people that were writing it were the ones that were really pushing it forward, making it popular. Whereas today, we're really familiar with performers, right? Like Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, those kind of people, we are drawn to them. They might have not necessarily written their songs, but it is performer driven. So way back in the day, it is community driven, and which is really quite beautiful if you think about it. So like I said, they evolved organically over time. So there's not one author or one composer for these songs. It is a culmination of people's work, their experiences, singing together over time. So when we sing this song, Sharing on this Oven, know that not one person wrote it, or at least not one person that we know. It has been developed over time. So we also need to talk about the purpose of a song, right? And not in purposes of songs have kind of developed since way back in the folkmusik days when these communities were really isolated. But for the most part, we can kind of track it to three things: expression, communication, and celebration. So expressing maybe how we feel, celebrating something. Have you ever thought of the reason we sing happy birthday? It's to celebrate. By the way, side note, the Norwegian happy birthday song is much more exciting than the American birthday song. If you don't believe me, just look it up. There's singing, there's dancing, there's curtsying, there's bowing. It's very fun. And then again, communication, right? Communicating with one another and within our communities, maybe things we're feeling. Stories is one of the really important things we'll talk about today. Because through these songs, stories are actually told. So it's not just the words that are giving us a story, it's the melody, it's the way it makes us feel that are contributing to the storytelling. And what kinds of stories are we going to tell? Well, lots of stories can be told through songs, right? Heroic deeds, things about romance, heroes and heroines, Lots of emotional songs, right? Or maybe about mythical creatures, maybe about daily work, chores, right? Or maybe just supernatural encounters, maybe about how much you love something or some place. So really, the stories you can tell are endless. And one of the story that we're going to tell today is a pretty simple one, and is about a woman, Steringa, who is doing all sorts of things. So these songs, in all, they reflect joy, they reflect sorrow, they reflect triumph, they reflect struggle, right? They are part of being human. It's how we express our humanity, right? So, um, sometimes these songs will sound very spooky. Sometimes they'll sound very happy. And what we take away from these songs, we can glean sort of values from way, way back in the day. We can see what people value, what people were doing, based on these stories that they are able to tell through us, through our singing, hundreds of years later. So, stories are told through a combination of elements, right? They're told through the melody. They're told through, of course, the lyrics. They're told through a tempo, right? Is it fast? Is it slow? They're told through maybe if it's major or if it's minor, if it's sad or if it's happy. Things like that are all going to be things we need to pay attention to. So there are a couple of distinct types of folk music that I want to mention. Today we'll be focusing mostly on vocal music, and obviously one song in particular. But there is an instrumental music which features maybe the cooler instruments that you've seen. Maybe you've seen a hardonged fiddle, which is like it looks like a regular violin, but really fancy, and it has extra vibrating strings or resonant strings that are under the regular four strings. And those really make it a very rich and harmonic tool that is worth checking out. So dance music is mostly associated with instrumental music. Another type of music that we have to talk about is joik. So joik is spelled Joik, joik. And when we think of traditional Norwegian music, often it doesn't come to the forefront because it's actually Sami. The Sami are the indigenous people of the Nordic countries, of specifically Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. And joik is a traditional, a very unique oral tradition, and Sami people will joik to reflect a person. So a joik isn't necessarily about someone; it is reflective of someone. And we could do a whole nother talk on that, but just so you know, that's what a yoik is. But vocal music, on the other hand, there are all types of vocal music. Still today, there are fast songs, there are ballads, there are religious songs like hymns, there are stab, which is kind of a unique term for Nordic songs, like sung songs. And different ones are popular in different parts of Norway. But today we are going to learn about sharing on Mestaven. And the key that I want you to look for when we are singing these things is what are you hearing in the melody or maybe in the words that's reflecting and the story or reflecting the landscape. We all know that Norway is a very, very, very pretty place with lots of fjords, lots of rocks, lots of water. So a lot of music, even in today and in the 1800s and in the old folk music times, we were hearing elements of landscape and storytelling that were evocative of these different things that were in nature. So, Greg, if you would switch to the next slide, we are going to learn a song called Skjæringa Mestaven. Okay, Skjæringa Mestaven. So this KJ, we panic. Don't panic. It's a sh sound. Not your librarian shh, but a shh, almost like you're a cat hissing. Shh. So, Skjæringa Mestaven. Okay, repeat after me at home, and I'll give you some time. We're going to do the text first, then we'll learn the melody, and I'll tell you what it all means at the end. But see if you can guess before we get there. So, Skjæringa Mestaven. Say that with me. Skjæringa Mestaven. Skjæringa Mestaven. You've learned 2 of the 6 lines in this. Are there 6? Roughly 6. Yep. So, Skjæringa Mestaven. We're going to go now to this. The first line is Skjæringa Mestaven, and then there's that H with the O, H, and then the O with the slash through it, and then the GT. That's hey. Hej! Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. I know that's a long word. So høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Høyt opp i Hakkedalen. So we've got kjerringa med staven høyt oppi Hakkedalen. Let's sing that first line together. Ready? I'll go first. Kjerringa med staven høyt oppi Hakkedalen. We'll break it down. So, kjerringa med staven. Your turn. Høyt oppi Hakkedalen. Høyt oppi Hakkedalen. Let's do that again. So repeat after me. I'll sing it first, and I'll give you time to sing. So, kjerringa med staven høyt oppi Hakkedalen. Høyt oppi Hakkedalen. Beautiful. Let's do it one more time. Kjerringa med staven høyt oppi Hakkedalen. That's your first line. Let's put it all together. Kjerringa med staven høyt oppi Hakkedalen. Did you get it? One more time. Kjerringa med staven høyt oppi Hakkedalen. It's catchy. So, that's your first line. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Now, this next part is a little bit faster, but I'll take you through the words first so you know what you're getting in. Åtte potter rømme. If you can't roll your R's, that's okay. So, åtte potter rømme. Åtte potter rømme. Så åtte potter rømme. Åtte potter rømme. Fire, 1, 2, 3, 4 merker smør. Fire merker smør. So we've got åtte potter rømme. Fire merker smør. Åtte potter rømme. Your turn. Åtte potter rømme. Fire merker smør. Okay, try that a little bit. It will make it a little bit longer, okay? Åtte potter rømme. Åtte potter rømme. Fire merker smør. Fire merker smør. Okay, so the first part of that goes, åtte potter rømme. Kind of goes right up the scale. Åtte potter rømme. Sing that right after I do. Ready? Åtte potter rømme. Åtte potter rømme. Fire merker smør. Fire merker smør. Separate those again. Åtte potter rømme. Åtte potter rømme. Fire merker smør. Fire merker smør. Okay. We'll make that one big phrase. Ready? Åtte potter rømmer. Fire merker smør. Okay. Your turn. Åtte potter rømmer. Fire merker smør. I know it gets jaunty when we sing it in full. You'll feel how like buoyant it is. Okay, so let's do that one more time. Repeat after me. Åtte pøtter rømme, fire mørker smør. Åtte pøtter rømme, fire mørker smør. Okay. Shall we go from the beginning? Okay. We'll do phrase by phrase. I'll go first. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Then we'll take this next part slower. Åtte pøtter rømme, fire merker smør. Åtte pøtter rømme, fire merker smør. It feels like a lot of in your mouth. That means you're doing it right. Okay? So åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. Åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. So åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. You are more than halfway there, my friends. So from the beginning, sing with me. Okay? Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Åtte pøtter rømme, fire merker smør. And that's the first part. Now you're going to sing exactly what you just sang, except for the words are slightly different. So that fourth line is Solei, Kina, Kari. Solei, Kina, Kari. Solei, Kina, Kari. Say that with me. Solei, Kina, Kari. Solei, Kina, Kari. That Shina sound is not a, it's not a, it's a, so Solei, Shina, Kari. Solei, Shina, Kari. Say that with me. Solei, Shina, Kari. And that next part after the comma is Ola hadde før. Ola hadde før. So we've got Solei, Shina, Kari. Your turn. Solei, Shina, Kari. Ola hadde før. Ola hadde før. Now it's that same melody from Åtte pøtter rømme, fire merker smør. Solei, Shina, Kari, Ola hadde før. Okay? So we have Solei, Shina, Kari. Ola hadde før. Let's do that. Solei, Shina, Kari. Your turn. Solei, Shina, Kari. Ola hadde før. Ola hadde før. Let's do that in its group, okay? So starting from Solei, Shina. Solei, Shina, Kari, Ola hadde før. Okay, one more time. Solei, Shina, Kari, Ola hadde før. Okay, let's do it from the beginning. All right, here we go. You sing with me, and we'll do it slow. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. Solei, Shina, Kari, Ola hadde før. That middle part is really the tough because it's all these words and all these notes, but you'll get it, I promise. Let's do the middle section one more time. Åtte pøtter rømme, fire merker smør. Solei, Shina, Kari, Ola hadde før. And then here we go. The last part is Kjerringa med staven. Sing that with me. Kjerringa med staven. And that's it. That's the whole tune, the whole melody. Okay? Let's do it phrase by phrase one more time before we put it all together. Starting from the beginning. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Okay? You want to sing that by yourself now? Now this next phrase is åtte potter med fire marker smør. Your turn. Åtte potter med fire marker smør. Next part. Ståle skinner Kari Ola ha det før. Your turn. Ståle skinner Kari Ola ha det før. Kjerring ta med staven. Okay, from the beginning, we'll still go slow and then we'll do it faster, okay? From the beginning. Sing with me, we'll have a great time. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedal. Åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. Ståle skinner Kari Ola har det før. Kjerringa med staven. There you have it. One more time at that pace. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. Ståle skinner Kari Ola har det før. Kjerringa med staven. All right, let's do it a little bit faster and then I'll tell you what it means. Okay? Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedalen. Åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. Ståle skinner Kari Ola har det før. Kjerringa med staven. So what does this mean? If you guessed that it was a woman and her staff making butter, you'd be correct. Okay? So, or making porridge, I should say. So kjerringa med staven is the woman with the staff high up in Hakkedal. Hakkedal is a place. Åtte potter rømme. So there's 8 pots of cream. Fire marker smør. So 4 things of butter. So 8 pots of cream, 4 things of butter. Ståle skinner Kari means, so as Kari churned, like Ula had done before. So they must be taking turns making the porridge. So they've got 8 pots of cream, 4 things of butter, and they're churning it. Kari is churning it now. Ula had done so previously. And then that last line, just like we did at the very beginning, is kjerringa med staven, the woman with the staff. So this song is all about doing like a daily task, right? Doing something that we have a shared experience with, right? So Ula and Kari, even though we might not know who they are in real life, there are these characters in the story doing something we can relate to. So one more time, let's do verse 1. Here we go. Kjerringa med staven høyt opp i Hakkedal. Åtte potter rømme, fire merker smør. Ståle skinner Kari Ola har det før. Kjerringa med staven. And there you have it. There's your first verse. But there are also 5 verses. So we have 4 more verses. We're not going to sing each verse like we did just now, but I'll take you through them so you can do it later. So let's go on to verse 2. Yeah, perfect. So we've got kjerringa med skjeppen. Kjerringa med skjeppen. So kjerringa med skjeppen means the woman with the stick. Hoppa over bekken. She hopped over the brucker, over the stream. Og så datt hun uti, then she fell in. Og så var hun blaut, and she was soaked. She was all wet. Så gikk hun hjemme, og så fikk hun graut. So then she went back home, and then she had her porridge that she had made earlier. And she is the woman with the stick. So I'll sing this verse for you really fast. Kjerringa med skjeppen hoppa over bekken, og så datt hun uti, og så var hun blaut, og så gikk hun hjem, og så fikk hun graut. Kjerringa med skjeppen. And there you go. So that's verse 2. Let's go on to verse 3. See what verse 3 is all about. We've got Skjæringa med sleiva. That's a fun word to say. Sleiva. So Skjæringa med sleiva satt høyt oppi sleiva. So the woman with her ladle. So the woman with her ladle sat high up on the cliff. So she has ladle, she's on the cliff. Og så var hun være utelaten da. So essentially, she became a troll. I told you there might be mythical characters today. So then she became a troll. Ja, men var det kare før I verden òg? So surely there were people before in the world too, right? Not just, there weren't just trolls before people, there were people in the world. So this is talking about the old world, the old days. And then it goes back to the woman or the woman with her ladle. So just as a recap, she's up in the cliffs with her ladle, and then she became a troll. But surely this is kind of like a side note to everyone listening. But there were people in the world before too, and there is that woman up on the cliff with her ladle. So I'll sing it for you really quick. Skjæringa med sleiva satt høyt og opp I kleiva. Og så var hun være utelaten da, ja, men var det kare før I verden og skjæringa med sleiva. I'll sing that one more time because I kind of missed the first part. Skjæringa med sleiva satt høyt opp I kleiva. Og så var hun være utelaten da, ja, men var det kare før I verden og skjæringa med sleiva. Okay. On to verse number 4. Let's see what this one is all about. So, skjæringa med furua. Furua. Satt høyt oppi furua. So it's the woman with the trowel. She sat up high in the pines or the forest. So, skjæringa med furua satt høyt oppi furua. Og så kom en herre hoppende forbi. Hoppende forbi. So came a little rabbit who was hopping by. He said, you just sit there, tiri tiri ti, which is kind of like a la 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 la. So han sa, stikk du bare, tiri tiri ti. Then skjæringa med furua, the woman with the trowel. I'll sing this for you really quick. Here we go. Skjæringa med furua satt høyt oppi furua, og så kom en herre hoppende forbi, og så sa sikk du, oh no, I'm so sorry. Han sa sikk du bare tiri tiri ti, skjæringa med furua. I've been speaking Norwegian my whole life and it's hard to get these words. So if you're struggling, don't worry, me too. One more time, mostly for me. Skjæringa med furua satt høyt oppi furua, og så kom en herre hoppende forbi. Han sa sitt du bare tiri tiri ti, skjæringa med furua. And finally, we've made it to verse number 5. Welcome to this final verse. You've made it this far. In our conclusion to this story, we have skjæringa hu strider. So the woman, she toiled. Also kom ein fyr og frydde. So, and then there came a boy and he proposed, ... We're about to hear what's next. Vil du være skjæring, skal jeg være man. So you will be my lady, I will be your husband. Vil du koke kaffe, skal jeg bære vann. If you make the coffee, I'll bring the water. And the woman toiled. So there's a nice little love song at the end of it. It's kind of been tumultuous, right? So there's been the woman high up in the cliffs, up in Hakadal. Then she became a troll, and then there was a hare hopping by, and now finally she meets her love. So I'll sing this for you quick. Our 5th and final verse. Skjæringa hu strider, så kom en fyr og fride, Vil du være kjerring, jeg skal være mann. Vil du koke kaffe, skal jeg bære vann. Kjerring av stride. And there you have it. There is Kjerring on my staven, a traditional folk song, a folk tune that you now have in your arsenal. So let's get a move on and take this and go to the rest of what we have planned for today. So if we, perfect, National Romantiken, that is a very long word and it means national romanticism or the national romantic era. And like I said previously, the folk music was really driven by communities, right? Driven by people who were in those communities. During this period of time, this was more inspired by composers, so the people that were writing the music and then having it performed. And this movement is not unique to Norway. This was happening all over the world, especially in Europe at this time. So this was in like the 1800s. And really, the big goal of this era was to develop a national identity through art and therefore music as a response to what was happening in history. Okay, so a brief, especially in Norway, so a brief history lesson. Norway and Denmark kind of owned Norway for the better part of 300 years. And then in 1814, Denmark was part of the Napoleonic Wars. They lost. And so Norway thought, wow, it's our time to be free. They wrote a constitution. They figured out how they were going to structure their political system, everything. And then they got the news that that would not be the case and that they would actually be then like a sort of ward of Sweden in 1814. And so Norway was kind of being juggled around from Denmark to Sweden and kind of without say in the matter. So there was really this push to figure out what was authentically Norwegian, what was really unique to Norway and unique to the Norwegian people. And so during this era, we saw really a focus back to folklore. So like all those great roles and things high up in the mountains, mythology and nature, all of those things came to the very front of this movement and became really popular during this era. So when we talk about this development of identity through art, there are many forms in which this comes, right? Not just music. So rosemalling or rose malling, if you've heard of that, that is also one of the things that was really popularized during this era. But in terms of the music, a lot of it is focused on what the other art in general is focused on. So it's focused on this folklore, mythology, and nature. And it evokes a sense of nostalgia, so like a longing for the past or appreciation for the past. Also patriotism, being proud of where you're from and proud to be Norwegian, proud to be Swedish, proud to be Danish, as well as a deep, deep, deep connection to nature. So Norway is one of those countries that is not like very many other countries. It is isolated, it is long, it is full of coastline, and it really makes it special. And so in Europe at the time, a lot of people really thought that Norway was sort of pure nature because there are not many people up there, and there's not a whole lot like industrialization and stuff. None of that's really going on. So it really became a part of their identity. Not that it wasn't before, but really became sort of the at the heart of being Norwegian. And this period gave rise to famous composers like Edvard Grieg and Sibelius, who's Finnish. Finland had their own thing going on at the time. We could also do a whole nother webinar on this, so we won't get there today. But Grieg is responsible for some of the tunes that you might know. So this, and on the next slide, I've got a title of a work that was composed by Edvard Grieg in 1876. So in this period between 1814 and 1905, when Norway was like part of Sweden, but they really didn't. And there's a work called the Peer Gynt Fleet. And it's kind of like an opera, sort of. It's like a big story about Peer Gynt and what he's doing with his life and what's going on in his world. And that's where we get songs like, if you've heard the orchestral tune, like the da 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 da. That is from this work. Maybe when you wake up in the morning, that's like the soundtrack playing in your head. It's very evocative of the morning. That's why it's called morning mood. And the way that they use instruments in that, lots of flutes to make it sound like birds, and to kind of color it with nature. Another piece from this work is called In the Hall of the Mountain King. And you might not recognize it from that title, but you might recognize it from this. That song, he's in the hole of the mountain, the hall of the mountain king, and he's being chased by trolls. So again, there's more storytelling here. When it gets louder, they're getting closer to which is a really cool instrumental thing that is happening and a really cool way to see storytelling, not only in like the folk roots of that, seeing like the mythology of it and the creatures that are in it, but also like the musical aspect. Another famous work to come out of this era was by Sibelius. And this one might be a little bit more on the nose for it being evocative of their homeland, but it's called Finlandia or Finlandia. And it's all about it. So I think we've had enough classical music for today. So I think we're going to hop up to the next one, which is all about pop music. So we're even further removed now from folk music and classical music, especially in its value. So today, and probably in the last 30 or 40 years, catchy melodies and rhythms have been kind of the focus of it, less so than the story of the woman on the cliff that is churning butter, who's becoming a troll. Things like long stories like that are not necessarily the focus of pop music today. It really prioritizes hooks and memorable choruses that are going to be stuck in your head forever. And I mean, not that folk music isn't catchy. I mean, if you're not singing "Shitting on the Stavin" for the rest of the day, I don't know. But there's also the emotional impact of it, and like the expression of feelings is really important to music today, more so than the complex narratives that I was talking about earlier. But nonetheless, it remains a way to reflect, and it's a reflection of a time, a place, an emotion, a perspective. So even if it came out in the 1980s, there's still something behind that that we're telling a story about. It might not be the same kind of stories that we saw 200, 300, 400 years ago, but it is nonetheless a story. And the Nordic region is really influential in this, maybe more so than you know. The Nordic region, not very big. So it's Iceland, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And Sweden, who you'll come to see is kind of the powerhouse of pop music, has 10 million people, but they are the third largest music exporter in the world. And maybe you'll see why in just a second. So I'm going to take you through like Scandinavia's greatest hits here for a minute. So our first one is Hooked on a Feeling. So for our older viewers, perhaps that remember this, it should not be a surprise, but for me it was to know that Hooked on a Feeling da, 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 is by Blue Swede, obviously, from Sweden. So that's one of our big hits to come out of the Nordic region in like roughly the 70s. The next one is a little tune called Waterloo by ABBA. And if you haven't heard of ABBA, they are a powerhouse of a singing group. They won Eurovision, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And this is kind of their big claim to fame with Waterloo. And the ABBA Museum in Sweden is one of the biggest tourist attractions there. So like Waterloo, if you've seen Mamma Mia, the second one, it's in that. Waterloo, couldn't escape if I wanted to. Na-na-na. I'm just giving you little ditties here and there. But if you recognize that. Moving on, there is, outside of ABBA, other things. So from Norway, actually, there's a classic called Take On Me, which is by Aha. It is not Aha, it is Aha. And it goes, you know, everybody knows. That's from Norway, circa 1985 by Aha. So a couple of these songs you're like, I didn't know those were Nordic. And I'm sure there are more surprising ones to come. So our next song is The Final Countdown. I associate this with, I don't know, big exciting events. And it is with banana, dun, 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 dun. You know that. So another perfect example of something that's not ABBA to come out of Sweden and be a number one all over the world. Our next one is The Sign by Ace of Base. This was the new one for me when I was preparing for this webinar. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was um that was Swedish. And it's the I saw the sign, I opened up my eyes. Da, 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 da. Clearly, I don't know that song very well, but I could recognize it. So The Sign, another product of Sweden. Our next one is Cotton Eye Joe. This was my big what when I was researching for this webinar because Cotton Eye Joe I think of as an American staple that every kid does in gym class, or like everybody knows, and it is in fact Swedish. If you're not familiar with this song, it's the "Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?" Cotton Eye Joe, a classic American hit, which is in fact Swedish. Our next one is another surprising one that we've heard a lot, especially with the movie last summer called Barbie Girl, that they've now made remixes of in the last couple of years because of the film Barbie. And it's by a Danish Norwegian group called Aqua. And if you don't know the song, it's the in the Barbie world, life in plastic. It's fantastic. There you go. So we've got Barbie Girl. The next one is Oxel F by Crazy Frog. And you might be like, what is that song? I think of it as being like a basketball game song. And it's the bumpo bumpo. That song, Swedish. Who knew? Who knew? And we're getting up into the 2000s, so they'll get more recent as we go. The next one here is What Does the Fox Say? And now you might associate this more with a video than with a song, but in this, they are two brothers from Norway, and they write many songs. And What Does the Fox Say just happens to be their like breakout success. What does the fox say? That is courtesy of. Next up, we've got some more popish music that maybe you've heard or maybe not. We've got Wake Me Up by Avicii. Avicii was a well-known DJ that unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, but Wake Me Up is one of his biggest hits. Another big hit, which actually came out of Norway on the next slide, is called Am I Wrong by Nico and Vinz. This was really popular in 2014. That might not be so familiar now. And another one that's actually from Denmark, which is our last one, is called 7 Years by a guy named Lucas Graham. That was another a big hit out of the Nordic region. So to wrap it up, you might be like, so why does this matter? Why does this matter, right? What is the influence that the Nordic region has today? And let me just tell you. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And it's all happening literally today in the next couple hours. So there is something called the Eurovision Song Contest, which it's like the Olympics meets American Idol in Europe. So every year they have a bunch of European countries come and they have one song that they can sing and that they perform. It has to be less than 3 minutes. And that song contest is the final, I should say, is happening today in Sweden. And Sweden has a long reputation of being very successful in Eurovision. It started back in 1956 and then really started to gain popularity after ABBA. This is how they got their start. If you're familiar with Celine Dion, this is also how she got her start in being a star. She won Eurovision. So there are some big names to come out of Eurovision that we aren't necessarily familiar with, for the Eurovision itself. We're not necessarily familiar with that today. So there's been a long-standing Nordic representation and success. If you couldn't tell, Sweden is kind of the powerhouse there. They've won 7 times. Most recently, they won last year, which is why they are hosting today in Malmö in Sweden. But Norway has won 3 times. Denmark won 3 times. Finland has won once, and Iceland has yet to win. However, in the summer of 2020, 2021, Will Ferrell starred in a movie about this that was on Netflix called like Eurovision Fire Saga or something. And it shot in popularity here in the United States and really brought some awareness to what Eurovision is. I mean, of course, it's a comedy, but it's funny and it's very at the heart of what Eurovision is because it's kind of silly, it's kind of off the wall, but nonetheless important. So today there's a big my big controversy is the people that are representing Sweden are actually Norwegian. They're twins. Their names are Marcus and Martinus. But it's a representation of music from all over Europe that is really quite interesting. They might not be your favorite songs in the whole world. They might be very weird in their presentation, but it is exciting nonetheless. So that takes us through our Nordic songs through the ages from folk music to nationalromantiken to pop music. Hopefully you learned something today. With that being said, I say we go ahead and start our Q&A portion.
Well, thank you so much for that, Eddy. That was so much info so fast. So, I now get to just open this up. So I just want to say we are going to open up the floor to questions. You could please use the Q&A function to submit your questions. I will be checking the Q&A, and I'll also check the chat in case there's anybody that's using that. But I actually had a quick question myself. If we could just get a little snippet of what the Norwegian birthday song
Oh,
is.
yes. Well, I'm going to have to stand up. So it is, everybody stands around you like this. Everybody holds hands and you stomp and you say, Hurra for deg som fyller. So I'll just do it for you. It's not very long. Hurra for deg som fyller ditt år och deg vill vi gratulera. Woo! Alle i ring omkring deg, vi står og ser nå hvor vi marsjerer. Bukkenikkene snu oss omkring, danser for deg med hopp og sprett og spring. Ønsker deg alle gode ting og si meg så hva vil du mere? Gratulere. There's your taste of the Norwegian birthday song, but it's more fun when there are more people doing it.
Yeah, so does the circle have to be big enough so when people bow, they don't hit each other?
Actually, in an ideal world, yes. I tend to do it if I have, like in my Norwegian classes at Luther, I say, everyone do what I do. And I'm the only one singing, but they follow after my actions. And that is quite fun. So, but in an ideal world, you have a bigger circle, yes. And not just a circle of one.
Let me see here real quick. So I wanted to check in about the first verse that we got to sing through. It was eight Otte
Åtte
what's
tøtter
the
rømme, fire mørker smør. Yep.
and so when you were explaining that, it was eight pots of cream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
but then you said four things of is Mecca kind of like a
It's
ambiguous.
it's kind of ambiguous. Like I am assuming it's like a stick or a chunk of butter. But I'm sure that back in the day, like a medkist bread was like probably a bigger than what we think of as like a one stick of butter, but it's a chunk of butter.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I didn't
Yes,
know if things was a proper, it is folk music after all.
it is. It's a rough translation because technically I think it translates to 4 marks of butter, which might be less helpful.
And then I also wanted the quick question came in what's the best way to view the Eurovision if we wanted to go right from this to that? What are
That is
your
a good
tips on
question.
getting about that?
If you have a Peacock subscription, I know it is on Peacock. Otherwise, there might be a couple of websites that you can get it on. But I'm getting it through Peacock.
Oh, there we go. We got two questions. It says, what is Hoyt Opi Hakadalen translated?
So it's high up in Hakadal, which is a place. I don't know where that is in Norway, but I'm Hakad. So Dal means valley. So Hakadal is like the name of the valley.
Oh, and then another one just popped in. Can you think of any good books or for Norwegian folk slash children's songs?
Hmm. Hmm. Any good books? What's so hard about that question is most of the way that it's been um, sort of learned and like has made the rounds is primarily through oral transmission, right? So singing it and then learning it and then singing it back. So I don't have any off the top of my head, but I'll think about it. But none off the top of my head.
If you come up with any, you can always send them to me and I can add them to the little email that goes out with the Zoom recording. Just so
Perfect.
no rush or anything. If nothing comes to mind, that's totally understandable, but hopefully we'll be able to get one added to that
I'll
email.
write myself a note right now.
Okay, good. uh Well, I think I have gotten through all the questions that I was able to. I had one slightly fun thing that I wanted to point out was when the verse that translates to the rabbit comes hopping by, the Norwegian word for hopping by is hoppende. Is
Hmm.
that's oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love
Isn't
that.
that cute?
So
Yes.
is that the Norwegian for hopping or hopping by?
So it hoppende is hopping technically, but å hoppe is to hop or to jump. So to hop and to jump are the same word in Norwegian. They don't distinguish from hopping versus jumping, which I think is cute.